Chinese tour guide SHOUTS, and runs in the courtyard spooking the king's guard's horse. Tourists from many countries gathered behind the marked lines, holding cameras and phones, whispering in excitement. Everyone knew this place was special. The king's guard ceremony was about to begin, and people waited with respect. Among the crowd was a Chinese tour guide named Li Wei. He was in his mid-30s, slim, neat, and wearing a small badge around his neck. He had been guiding tour for many years. He was careful, responsible, and always worried about the safety of his group. Today, he was leading 12 tourists, most of them visiting this country for the first time. They were excited, curious, and sometimes a little careless. Li Wei held a small flag so his group could follow him easily. He spoke in a calm voice, explaining the history of the palace, the rules of the courtyard, and the importance of staying behind the lines. He reminded them again and again, "Please stay together. Do not cross the barriers." The guards and horses are trained, but they are still living beings. The sound of heavy boots echoed across the courtyard as the king's guards appeared. They wore traditional uniforms, tall hats, and serious expressions. Each guard sat proudly on a large, strong horse. The horses stood still, trained to ignore noise and movement. The crowd grew quiet, watching with respect. Li Wei felt relieved. Everything seemed under control. He moved his eyes across his group, counting them one by one. 1, 2, 3, 11. His heart skipped. One person was missing. He turned his head quickly and saw a middle-aged man from his group standing closer to the restricted area. The man had stepped away to take a better photo. He was smiling, holding his phone up, completely focused on the guard and horse in front of him. He did not see how close he was to danger. Li Wei's chest tightened. He knew the rules. Crossing that line was not allowed. More importantly, it was unsafe. A horse could move suddenly. One wrong step could cause injury. "Sir, sir, please come back," Li Wei called out in Chinese. But the man did not hear him. The crowd noise was low, but his focus was elsewhere. Li Wei felt panic rise inside him. His thoughts raced. If the man stepped any closer, security would step in. The tour could be stopped. Someone could get hurt. As the guide, Li Wei would be responsible. He imagined paperwork, questioning, maybe even being blamed for something serious. Without thinking further, Li Wei started moving fast toward the man. His feet tapped loudly on the stone ground. His voice grew louder as fear pushed it out of him. He shouted again, louder this time, using instinct instead of careful words. The sound of his voice cut through the quiet courtyard. For a split second, everything froze. Then the horse closest to the man reacted. The horse's ears flicked back. Its body shifted. It lifted its front leg slightly, sensing sudden noise and movement. The guard tightened the reins instantly, his face still controlled but alert. Gasps spread through the crowd. Li Wei stopped running. His heart felt like it was beating in his throat. He realized too late what he had done. His shouting and sudden movement were exactly what should never happen in such a place. The man from his group finally turned around, fear replacing the smile on his face. He stepped back quickly, almost tripping over his own feet, and rushed toward Li Wei. Guards nearby moved into action. One signaled with his hand. Another spoke firmly, though his words were calm and controlled. The horse was guided back into stillness, but the tension remained thick in the air. Tourists whispered. Cameras lowered. Some people looked annoyed, others looked scared. Li Wei stood still, his hands shaking slightly. His face burned with embarrassment and fear. He bowed his head instinctively, apologizing in his own language, even though no one had yet spoken directly to him. Security officers approached. They did not shout. Their expressions were serious but professional. One of them gestured for Li Wei to step aside. His legs felt heavy as he followed. Inside his mind, worries flooded in. Had he broken a serious rule? Would he be fined? Would he be banned from guiding tour here again? He thought of his family back home, his job, his reputation. All of it felt suddenly fragile. The officer asked him questions in English. Li Wei understood some, but not all. He answered slowly, choosing simple words, explaining that he was trying to stop a tourist from entering a dangerous area. His voice trembled, but his words were honest. Behind them, the ceremony paused briefly. The guards stayed firm, the horses calm again as if nothing had happened. But Li Wei knew something had changed for him. He glanced at his group. Some looked worried for him. Others avoided his eyes. The man who had stepped forward stood quietly now, his face pale, realizing how close he had come to causing a serious problem. The officer nodded, listening carefully. Another officer checked nearby cameras. Time felt slow, stretching every second. Li Wei stood there, breathing shallowly, wishing he could turn back time by just a few moments. He promised himself that if he was given another chance, he would be even more careful, even more strict. As the questioning continued, Li Wei's fear slowly mixed with hope. He had acted out of responsibility, not disrespect. He prayed that someone would see that. The courtyard returned to quiet, but inside Li Wei's heart, the noise had not stopped. He knew this moment would stay with him forever, no matter how it ended. The courtyard did not return to normal right away. Even though the horse stood still again and the guards held their positions, the feeling in the air had changed. People were no longer relaxed. Whispers moved through the crowd like small waves. Cameras stayed lowered. Everyone waited to see what would happen next. Li Wei stood near the side with two security officers. His hands were folded in front of him, fingers tight. He kept his eyes down, not wanting to draw more attention. His heart still beat fast and his mouth felt dry. Every sound around him felt louder than before, even the soft steps of people shifting their weight. One officer spoke again, slowly and clearly. He asked Li Wei to explain everything from the beginning. Li Wei nodded and took a deep breath. He spoke in simple English, choosing his words carefully. He explained how he was leading a group, how one tourist stepped too close, and how he acted without thinking because he was afraid someone would get hurt. As he spoke, he tried to stay calm, but his voice shook. He was not used to being questioned like this in such a serious place. Back home, he was confident and respected as a guide. Here, he felt small and unsure. The officer listened without interrupting. His face showed no anger but no smile either. Another officer stood nearby, watching the crowd and the guards. Everything felt controlled, but the pressure on Li Wei did not ease. Behind the officers, Li Wei noticed the man from his group slowly being guided closer by another staff member. The man looked nervous, his shoulders stiff, his face pale. When their eyes met, the man looked down quickly, full of regret. The officer turned to the man and asked him what happened. The man explained that he only wanted a photo. He said he did not understand how close he was to danger. He admitted he ignored the guide's instructions. His voice was quiet, and his hands trembled slightly as he spoke. Li Wei listened, feeling a mix of relief and worry. Relief that the truth was coming out. Worry that it might still not be enough. Around them, the guards remained still, trained to hold their posture no matter what. The horses stood calm now, but their strength was clear. Li Wei could not stop thinking about what could have happened if the horse had moved more suddenly. The thought made his stomach twist. Some tourists in the crowd began to speak among themselves. A few shook their heads, clearly unhappy. Others pointed gently toward the restricted line, understanding how close the situation had been. A woman whispered to her child, reminding him to stay still and quiet. Minutes passed. They felt much longer. One officer received a message through his earpiece. He nodded slightly and stepped aside to speak quietly with another official. Li Wei stood alone for a moment, feeling exposed. He could feel people looking at him, judging him, wondering if he was careless or reckless. In his mind, he replayed the moment again and again. The shout, the run, the horse's movement. He wished he had found another way. He wished he had trusted security to handle it. But deep inside, he knew his fear came from responsibility. He cared too much about the people he guided. The officer returned and asked Li Wei to wait. They said they needed to review camera footage. Li Wei nodded and said nothing. He stood as still as he could, trying to control his breathing. As they waited, Li Wei thought about his life as a guide. He remembered his first tour years ago, how nervous he was, how proud his parents felt. Guiding was not just a job for him. It was how he supported his family. It was how he shared the world with others. The idea of losing that because of one moment terrified him. The crowd slowly shifted back into place as the ceremony prepared to continue. Some people stayed focused on the guards, but many still glanced toward Li Wei. He felt the weight of their attention even when he did not look up. After some time, the officer returned again. His tone was calmer now. He said the cameras showed the tourists stepping beyond the allowed line. They saw Li Wei trying to stop him. They also saw how quickly everything happened. Li Wei felt a small release of tension in his chest, but he did not relax fully. He knew shouting and running were still serious mistakes in this setting. The officer explained that safety was the highest priority. He said Li Wei's intention seemed to be to protect, not to cause trouble. However, he also explained that sudden movement and loud voices could put guards, horses, and visitors at risk. Li Wei listened carefully and nodded. He apologized again, slowly and sincerely. He promised he would be more careful, more aware of local rules, and stricter with his group in the future. The officer looked at him for a long moment, as if deciding something important. The silence felt heavy. Li Wei's heart pounded again. Finally, the officer said that no further action would be taken at this time. There would be a warning placed on record. Li Wei would be allowed to continue his tour, but he must follow all rules strictly. Relief washed over Li Wei so strongly that his knees felt weak. He bowed his head deeply in thanks. He repeated his apology and expressed gratitude for the understanding shown to him. The officer nodded and stepped away. The man from Li Wei's group approached quietly. He bowed his head as well and apologized to Li Wei in a low voice. He said he did not realize the danger and felt ashamed for causing trouble. Li Wei placed a gentle hand in front of him, signaling that it was okay. He told the man that safety mattered more than photos. The man nodded, his eyes filled with regret. The guards returned fully to position, and the ceremony resumed as if nothing had happened. The horses stood proud and calm, their training clear to everyone watching. Li Wei returned to his group. He spoke softly now, reminding them again of the rules, his voice steady but serious. This time, everyone listened closely. No one stepped out of line. No one raised their voice. As the ceremony continued, Li Wei stood quietly at the back of his group. His body was there, but his mind was still processing everything. He felt grateful, humbled, and deeply aware of how fast things could change. He knew this experience would stay with him. It was a lesson he would never forget. Responsibility meant caring, but it also meant understanding limits. And sometimes, even good intentions needed better control. The courtyard remained grand and calm, but for Li Wei, it would always be the place where a single moment taught him how heavy responsibility could truly be. The rest of the ceremony passed without any more problems, but Li Wei did not feel calm. Even as the guards marched with perfect timing and the horses stood strong and still, his mind kept drifting back to what had happened. Every small sound made him tense. Every movement near the horses made his heart jump. He stayed alert, watching his group closely, making sure no one stepped even a little too far. When the ceremony ended, the crowd slowly began to move away. Tourists talked excitedly again, but their voices stayed softer than before. Some people glanced back at the guards one last time, while others checked their photos and videos. Li Wei gathered his group and guided them toward the exit path. He walked more slowly now, making sure everyone stayed together. As they moved away from the courtyard, the man who had stepped too close earlier walked beside Li Wei. He spoke quietly, his voice full of regret. He said he felt ashamed and thanked Li Wei for reacting quickly, even though it caused trouble. He admitted that he had not taken the rules seriously enough. Li Wei listened and nodded. He told the man that places like this demanded respect, not just curiosity. He explained that animals, even trained ones, could react in unexpected ways. The man agreed and promised to be more careful for the rest of the trip. The group continued walking. Some tourists whispered among themselves, replaying the moment with excitement, as if it were part of the tour itself. Others stayed quiet, still thinking about how quickly a peaceful situation had almost turned dangerous. Li Wei noticed everything but said little. He felt tired in a way that had nothing to do with walking. Later, when the group reached a quiet garden area outside the main palace grounds, Li Wei stopped and allowed everyone a short break. Benches lined the path, and tall trees offered shade. The noise of the city felt far away. For the first time since the incident, Li Wei allowed himself to breathe more deeply. He sat down for a moment, resting his hands on his knees. His thoughts slowed, but they did not stop. He replayed the moment again, but this time with more clarity. He understood now that fear had pushed him to act too fast. His heart had wanted to protect, but his actions had not matched the environment. As he sat there, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He hesitated before checking it. Messages from other guides had already started to appear. Someone had heard about an incident in the courtyard. Someone else asked if it was him. News traveled fast among people in the same profession. Li Wei felt a knot form in his stomach. He typed a short reply, saying everyone was safe and that it had been a misunderstanding. He did not want rumors to grow. He knew how easily stories could change when passed from one person to another. One of the tourists, a woman who had been quiet all day, approached him. She thanked him softly. She said she saw the man step too close and believed Li Wei acted out of care, not carelessness. Her words surprised him. He smiled gently and thanked her in return. That small moment of understanding helped ease his heart. He realized that not everyone saw him as the person who caused trouble. Some saw him as someone who tried to protect others. When the break ended, Li Wei stood up and gathered his group again. He spoke clearly and calmly. He reminded them of the remaining schedule and repeated the safety rules once more. This time, his tone was firm but gentle. Everyone nodded. No one questioned him. As the day continued, Li Wei led his group through museums and streets filled with history. He focused on his work, explaining landmarks and stories with care. Slowly, his confidence began to return, but it was different now. It was quieter, more thoughtful. In the evening, after the tour ended and the tourists returned to their hotel, Li Wei walked alone through a nearby park. The sky was painted with soft colors as the sun set. Birds moved between trees and couples walked past, talking quietly. The calm felt healing. He sat on a bench and watched people pass. For the first time that day, he allowed his emotions to fully surface. Fear, relief, embarrassment, and gratitude mixed together. He realized how close he had come to serious consequences, not just for himself but for others. He thought about responsibility. Being a guide was not only about knowledge and schedules. It was about judgment, awareness, and self-control. He understood now that reacting quickly was not always the same as reacting wisely. Li Wei promised himself that he would learn from this moment. He would set clearer boundaries with his groups. He would trust local staff and security more. He would stay calm, even when fear tried to take control. As night settled in, Li Wei stood up and began walking back toward his hotel. His steps were slow but steady. He felt changed, not broken. The day had tested him, but it had also taught him something valuable. Back in his room, Li Wei wrote notes in his small guidebook. He recorded what had happened, not as a mistake to forget, but as a lesson to remember. He wanted to grow, not just move on. Before sleeping, he sent a message to his family, telling them he was safe and that the day had been challenging but meaningful. Their replies came quickly, filled with encouragement and care. As Li Wei lay down, the images of the courtyard returned one last time. But this time, they did not bring panic. They brought understanding. He closed his eyes, knowing that tomorrow would be another chance to do better, to guide with more wisdom, and to carry the weight of responsibility with a calmer heart. The next morning began quietly for Li Wei. Sunlight filtered through the thin curtains of his hotel room, touching the edge of the bed and the small table near the window. For a moment he lay still, listening to the sounds of the city waking up. Cars passed in the distance. People talked outside. Life was moving forward just like it always did. He sat up slowly and took a deep breath. His body felt rested, but his mind was already busy. Yesterday's events returned to him, not as fear this time, but as something unfinished. He knew the experience had changed him. The question was how he would carry that change into his work. After getting dressed, Li Wei reviewed his schedule. He had another tour planned, different people, a different route. Still, the responsibility was the same. He paused for a moment, then wrote a few extra notes on his phone. Simple reminders: stay calm, speak early, trust the rules, protect without panic. At the hotel lobby, his new group waited, faces full of curiosity, excitement, and trust. Li Wei greeted them with a polite smile. He introduced himself and spoke about the day ahead. Before anything else, he clearly explained safety rules and expectations. His voice was calm, steady, and confident. He did not rush. He made sure everyone understood. As they walked toward their first destination, Li Wei felt more grounded. He paid attention to every detail. He counted his group often. He watched how they moved, how close they stood to restricted areas. He gently corrected small mistakes before they became problems. People responded well. They listened. Later that day, they passed near the palace grounds again, though not inside the main courtyard. Li Wei felt a slight tightening in his chest, but he kept walking. He spoke calmly, sharing history and stories. He did not avoid the place. He faced it, understanding that fear only held power if it was allowed to grow. During a break, one tourist asked about the King's Guard ceremony. Li Wei paused, choosing his words carefully. He spoke about discipline, tradition, and respect. He explained how carefully trained the guards and horses were, and how visitors also carried responsibility when standing so close to history and living symbols. The group listened closely. Some nodded in understanding. One man commented on how important it was to follow rules in foreign countries. Li Wei agreed. He felt a quiet pride rise in him. He was not just guiding people through places anymore. He was helping them understand respect. In the afternoon, Li Wei received an unexpected message. It was from a senior tour coordinator. The message was polite but serious. They asked him to stop by the office later in the day. Li Wei's heart skipped slightly. He knew this was likely connected to the incident. After finishing the tour, Li Wei went to the office. The building was simple and quiet. He sat across from the coordinator, his posture straight, his expression respectful. The coordinator spoke calmly, asking Li Wei to explain what happened in his own words. Li Wei did not rush. He told the story clearly and honestly. He admitted his mistake. He explained his fear and his intention to protect his group. He spoke about what he had learned and how he planned to improve. The coordinator listened carefully. When Li Wei finished, there was a long pause. Then the coordinator nodded. They said incidents like this were rare but important. They appreciated Li Wei's honesty and responsibility. They reminded him that professionalism included emotional control, especially in sensitive places. Li Wei agreed fully. He thanked them for the chance to speak. The coordinator then surprised him. Instead of punishment, they offered guidance. They suggested additional training sessions focused on crowd management and cultural awareness. Li Wei felt relieved and grateful. He accepted immediately. He understood that learning was not a sign of weakness, but growth. As he left the office, Li Wei felt lighter. The weight he had been carrying since the incident finally began to lift. He realized that facing consequences did not always mean loss. Sometimes it meant improvement. That evening, Li Wei met another guide for tea. They talked about their work, their challenges, and the pressure of responsibility. Li Wei shared his experience openly. The other guide listened with interest and respect, not judgment. The conversation helped Li Wei see his experience from another angle. Mistakes, when handled honestly, could become valuable lessons not just for one person, but for many. Walking back to his hotel, Li Wei noticed how differently he felt now. He was still cautious but no longer afraid. He felt more aware, more prepared. In his room, he wrote again in his guidebook. This time his notes were longer. He wrote about balance, about how caring too much could lead to rushed actions, and how calm thinking could protect everyone better. He thought about the guard and the horse. He respected their training even more now. He understood that their calm came from discipline and control, not just strength. Before sleep, Li Wei looked out the window at the city lights. He felt thankful for a second chance. Not everyone received one so clearly. He knew there would always be moments of pressure in his work, but now he felt ready to meet them with a steadier heart. The incident in the courtyard had tested him, but instead of breaking him, it had shaped him into a better guide, one who understood that true responsibility meant not just quick action, but thoughtful action as well. The final day of Li Wei's trip arrived quietly. Morning light filled his hotel room again, but this time his heart felt steady. The weight he had carried since the courtyard incident was lighter now, almost gone. He stood by the window for a moment, watching people move below, and felt ready to finish this journey with calm and care. After breakfast, Li Wei checked out of the hotel and placed his small bag over his shoulder. Today, he was not guiding a group. His work was done for this trip. He had one last free walk before leaving the city. He decided to visit a quiet riverside path where locals often walked in the early hours. As he walked, he thought about everything that had happened. What began as fear had turned into learning. What felt like a failure had become a turning point. He realized that growth did not come from perfect days but from difficult ones. At the riverside, he sat on a bench and watched the water move slowly. Birds landed near the edge, searching for food. A father walked past with his child, holding the little hand tightly. That simple scene reminded Li Wei why responsibility mattered. Care was not loud. It was patient and steady. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from the man who had stepped too close to the restricted area on the first day. The man thanked Li Wei once more. He said the incident had changed how he behaved as a tourist. He promised to be more respectful wherever he traveled next. Li Wei smiled softly. That message meant more to him than any official warning or discussion. It showed that something good had come from that tense moment. Later that morning, Li Wei headed toward the train station. The building was busy, full of travelers dragging bags, checking tickets, and saying goodbye. He stood in line calmly, waiting his turn. Unlike earlier in the week, he did not feel rushed. He had learned the value of patience. While waiting, he noticed a young guide nearby struggling to manage a group. People were stepping out of line, talking loudly, ignoring instructions. Li Wei watched for a moment, then gently stepped forward. He offered quiet advice, simple words, and calm gestures. The group slowly settled. The young guide thanked him, relief clear on his face. Li Wei told him something simple: stay calm first. People follow calm more than noise. The young guide nodded, remembering the advice. As Li Wei boarded the train, he found a seat by the window. The train began to move, slowly leaving the city behind. Buildings turned into streets, then into open land. He watched quietly, thinking about home. When he arrived back in his country, familiar sounds and language welcomed him. His family met him at the station. Their smiles eased any remaining tension in his heart. He told them the story over dinner that night carefully and honestly. His parents listened closely. His mother worried at first, but then smiled with pride. His father nodded thoughtfully. They told him that learning from mistakes was part of becoming stronger. Their words stayed with him. The next week, Li Wei returned to work. His first tour after coming home felt different. He spoke with clarity and confidence. He watched his group carefully, not with fear but with awareness. He corrected small problems early, calmly, and respectfully. Tourists responded well. They listened. They trusted him. Li Wei realized that his calm presence made others feel safe. That was something he had not fully understood before. Over time, Li Wei became known not just as a guide with knowledge, but as one with wisdom. New guides asked him for advice. He shared his experience openly, not hiding the mistake, but using it as a lesson. He taught them that shouting rarely solved problems, that rushing could create danger, that respect for rules protected everyone, and most of all, that responsibility required control over one's own emotions. Months later, Li Wei returned to the same country, guiding a new group. When they visited the palace grounds, he stood quietly near the courtyard entrance. He explained the rules carefully. His voice was calm, his movements were slow, the guards stood proud, the horses stood strong and steady. This time, nothing went wrong. Li Wei watched the ceremony with a quiet smile, not because nothing happened, but because he knew he was ready if something did. Calm was no longer something he tried to force. It had become part of him. As the group moved away, Li Wei took one last look at the courtyard. It no longer filled him with fear. It reminded him of growth. That single moment when he had shouted and run in panic had shaped him more than years of smooth tour ever had. It taught him balance. It taught him respect. It taught him that good intentions needed calm actions to truly protect others. As Li Wei walked forward with his group, he felt confident in who he had become. A guide who understood that real strength was quiet, steady, and thoughtful. And as life continued, Li Wei carried that lesson with him, knowing that sometimes the moments that scare us the most are the ones that guide us toward becoming better than we were before.